with a BA from King's College, London, and a master's and PhD from the School of Oriental and African Studies, Dr. Alanoud Sharekh worked as a gender politics consultant for UNIFEM, Freedom House, and the UNDP on academic and social outreach projects in Kuwait and the GCC. Her teaching posts include Kuwait University, Gulf University of Science and Technology, and the Arab Open University. She's also a visiting lecturer at Uppsala University, Sweden, lecturer also on Islam and Britain at SOAS, and Fulbright Scholar on Women and Islam at Whittier College, USA. She has published several books and articles on gender, culture politics, and kinship policies in the GCC, including popular culture and political identity in the Arab Gulf states. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Alanoud Sharekh.
Thank you very much. It's very humbling to speak about forbidden images after Manal Doyan and Ali Farzat, but I'm gonna give it my best shot. All right. So first off, I'd like to start like the others have started by thanking Nuqat for putting together this wonderful panel of speakers and opening up our minds to the changes happening around us. So thank you, ladies, so much. I think we have seen as a theme running through the conference so far that there are some general things we can say about the forbidden image. So if we start with the idea that any amorous poses, couples kissing, sort of displays of affection, except if it's men kissing men in a formal situation like a diwaniyah, that's a forbidden image, in spite of our fondness for both royals and married couples. Women's bodies, their necklines, their thighs, their arms, this I think is a bit of an extreme example, but we usually receive our magazines with parts of the body being blacked out, sometimes ripped out altogether, so you're left guessing what the rest of the article was or what was exactly wrong with the look. And the same thing happens in our cinema experiences. It makes the movie both more challenging and mysterious because you have to fill in the gaps of what happened. So IKEA in their 2012 catalog decided maybe they didn't want to have pages ripped off of their Saudi Arabia print. And so they came up with the ingenious idea of just, to quote Manal Doyan, making women disappear altogether, as you can see between the two images. IKEA later apologized for this decision because it caused international outrage. But I think the theme here is that the forbidden can vary depending on where you are in the region and depending on the political climate. If any of you have been following this ridiculous campaign that's been going on recently in Kuwait, apparently this season, pumpkin paraphernalia and anything to do with Halloween is a forbidden image. Before that, we had a campaign against Valentine hearts and red roses. And you know, as you can see here, there's a no sign on the Christmas tree. So anything sort of associated with Western culture or the Christian faith currently is a forbidden image. This wasn't the case in the past. Maybe next season it won't be a problem. But the forbidden is changeable, it's mutable, and it's also depending on the whims of a particular censor. So then how do you deal with the forbidden image? And we've seen many examples of how it's being dealt with. But what if it's the most forbidden of forbiddens? Everybody here remembers the Danish cartoon frenzy. So what if you are Al-Haqqad in the 70s and you want to deal with the Prophet's life, peace be upon him? You get Al-Azhar's blessing to do that, and you use a particular trick that is repeated here in the GCC. Yeah.
الصحراء بالليل أدرك أن الله أكبر من أن يوضع بين 4 جدران.
As you can see here, we have several cues used to symbolize the forbidden. The music is a cue that we are now in the presence of the holy. Also, the camera moves. So what Al-Aqad is asking us to do in dealing with the forbidden, what our artists in the area ask us to do, is to become accomplices with them. We are in agreement that this symbol represents the forbidden. Another important thing in dealing with the forbidden that is going to repeat itself is context. Depending on how you package the forbidden, it becomes more acceptable. Al-Aqad, of course, was spreading the message of Islam. And anything you tap under a religious banner, anything maybe you tap under an acceptable social banner, you can probably get away with. So we go from the sublime to the slightly ridiculous. This is a picture taken in a municipality in Saudi Arabia. The governor was there to attend a breast cancer conference, and as you can see, there are exposed mammaries, and all the women around him are extremely covered. So you can expose the forbidden, but under socially sanctioned circumstances. Another example of this is our national icon here in Kuwait, or one of our national icons, I should say, Alawi. Now, this is a clip taken from one of the most famous Kuwaiti soap operas called Darb al-Zalag. Alawi is the prototypical old Kuwaiti lady with the thobe and, you know, the shyness, and she's so sweet, and, you know, we get all nostalgic about her, and we use her repeatedly in our art and in dealing with something that's typically Kuwaiti. I mean, you can just feel the bukhur and the achar coming off Alawi. And of course, Alawi is a man in drag. She's played by a man, Abdulaziz al-Nimesh, so in this sense, it's fine for a man to put on makeup and you know, wear a dress and so on. But if you try to do it out of this context, then the forbidden is no longer socially sanctioned. And just to take this idea further and bring it closer to us, in the holiest of holies, in the month of Ramadan, we are bombarded by soap operas that deal with the forbidden. I don't know why, but it seems to be fine to talk about incest and pedophilia and drugs and you know, have people with exposed bodies during Ramadan. That's fine, because apparently these soap operas are teaching us a moral tale. Because at the end of it, everybody who does anything wrong either dies or ends up crazy. So if you put it in a context, then we can handle the forbidden. So you would think that if Kuwaitis are okay seeing booze on screen during Ramadan, they'd be okay with the picture of a bottle in an art exhibition. But they're not. This is from Kuwaiti artist's Sharekh Amin's series, It's a Man's World. And this particular picture is called Hedonism. And as you can see, there's a bottle of whiskey. And, you know, I don't know, I think this is more fantasy than reality. I don't know any woman in Kuwait that's surrounded by 3 men at her beck and call. But still, a show of hands, please. Who, as the censors who closed down her show felt, sees in this image something that is pornographic and blasphemous. Now, I think blasphemous is the most important word. Do you guys feel that this is pornographic and blasphemous? I don't know. I mean, I can see hints of something, but I don't know. If we look at this image, for example, I can clearly see why it would be pornographic and blasphemous. This is from the same artist's previous series called Bullets. And we will never have a discussion about a show with this image being closed down in Kuwait currently, because this cannot be shown in Kuwait. This was made for an exhibition in London. And it was bought eventually by a Kuwaiti, and it's called Take Me to Heaven. So this is, I think, a very polarizing image. And one thing I think it proves is that the forbidden changes with the audience. The face we show outside of our countries is very different from the face we show inside our countries, even in an official basis. These are pictures taken from Kuwait's National Pavilion at the Venice Biennale, and they deal with the sculptures of Sami Mohammed, who I think we can all agree is one of the most important artists to come out of Kuwait. These sculptures are not on display in Kuwait. We can't handle them being displayed. Last I heard, these beautiful giant statues were locked up in a warehouse in Sharekh. So the forbidden changes with the audience, and we are not honest with ourselves enough that we can show these images here. So this brings me to the example that I used, whether it's in Kuwait or in Saudi Arabia, or Saudi Arabia this year is celebrating an Oscar-nominated movie that they can't show in Saudi Arabia because they don't have cinemas. So these types of ironies come up again and again. Ala Yunus, in explaining her choice, and she was the curator for the Venice Biennale, she chose Tariq Hussein's photographs and Sami Mohammed's sculptures because she wanted to talk about national works. And those national works, she said, represent Kuwait in a moment of pause after its progress. Right now, I think there is a pause in our cultural progress. There is a pause in our examination of the forbidden and the taboo. This is a problem because these two images, they flirt with the taboo and the forbidden through the familiar. This is part of our, I think, nostalgic burden. We are so close temporally to our past that we still seek our identity through manipulating familiar images, whether it's the dhow, or the sand dunes, or the abaya, or the prayer mat, or the sheikh. But the political climates change. There is religious backlash, there's political backlash, that we become hesitant to deal with our own national pride issues. And this is a problem because art should be universal and it should be a dialogue. If we isolate ourselves, even within our own communities, then we're having a monologue. This is part of the universal artistic language. And I can see how there are representations of the forbidden, I guess. But if we're not part of a universal lexicon, then what are we building on? We need to create a space for the forbidden in other cultures within our own, whether it's pumpkin paraphernalia or it's discussing their artwork openly. These images are from a course I was supposed to teach called Introduction to the Humanities at a private university in Kuwait. And we got into a big frenzy because we were teaching mature students who might be seriously offended by these images. So we decided to shelve it. Now that's another conversation about academic freedom I'm not going to go into. But if we don't admit that they're forbidden images, and I think in this day and age where you have access on the internet to everything, it seems a bit ridiculous to say that we can't have these images in our curriculums. What other places in the region have managed to do is create enough space within the forbidden for a dialogue. This clip is from Mike Davis's 2006 article on Dubai, where he said that high culture cannot be imported and consumed, and therefore their bid to be a cultural player on the international scene was doomed to fail. Now, what I've seen happen in the past 7 years is not only has Dubai and the UAE, I think, succeeded in becoming the cultural hub of the region, they've also surpassed, I think, passive consumption or appreciation to become the incubators for indigenous producers of art and carrying a dialogue within the borders of the forbidden. So the state sanctions dialogues to do with the forbidden, whether in Art Dubai or Art Abu Dhabi or in the film festivals, in the Sharjah Binali. In fact, they take it to such an extreme that they can have alternative art shows as well, where other discussions of the forbidden. This is an example of an exhibition that I think, Manal, you were also part of, that discussed the body. MND, Made in Dubai, is the alternative art scene, and they had an entire discussion about how the body was forbidden in the GCC. So how do you discuss the forbidden without using the forbidden? And we just, try to have a conversation about these things culturally, like in Nuqat, but we're also faced with the reality that we're sort of preaching to the choir. This is not a typical audience that we're discussing these things with as well. So how do you create a cultural space, and how do you then grow into a conversation about forbidden? I think if you shock people too much, and today we're talking about shock, you lose them. You turn them off. They are not interested in your art. So then how do you have a conversation and keep them interested? I think our Saudi artists, and this project, which started in 2008, excels in doing that, excels in using the boundaries and the repressions of the culture, manipulating them to bring you and engage you into a conversation. Sometimes the images used by the artists who made up the collective of Edge of Arabia would infuriate you. You can't decide if they're pushing the envelope too much or not pushing it enough. And that's, I think, a more successful use of the forbidden. I think the Saudis excel in this sort of subtle interplay, and not just through art. I think we have examples of them going back to Ramadan TV and South soap opera. The Saudis were bravest and more courageous in dealing with political satire, I think, than elsewhere in the Gulf. For 18 years, the cast and crew of Tash Matash examined national taboos, religious elites, merchant elites, ruling entitlements, and etc. In fact, they faced threats, and they had to relocate to Dubai. And we have galleries here relocating to Dubai. Unfortunately, we're losing Jam. Our artists in the National Pavilion relocated to Dubai. The cast and crew of Tash Matash relocated to Dubai. But the theme here isn't move to Dubai. I don't want you to misunderstand me, right? You can stay at home and still do it. And today, we have digital media, social media. So the forbidden can be pushed even farther, right? We can engage in a dialogue away from governmental censorship. And this is a clip also from young Saudi artists. This is a clip from La Ikthar.
بسم الله وعلى بركة الله صارت أرضنا ولد هلا ولد هلا.
So the idea of entitled elites grabbing masses of lands in the GCC and claiming them for their own and becoming landlords, and having this housing crisis happening in Kuwait. These are all sticky subjects. They're kind of taboo, but because we have larger freedoms today, digital media, social tools, we can have open discussions about them, open-ish discussions about them, and we can push the boundaries of cultural taboos, political taboos, re-examining the language of the forbidden. That is not to say that that doesn't come without a price. I think this is a problem that we are just starting to examine. Freedom of expression does not mean freedom from consequence. And today, we've embraced social media tools, but we have to understand that if we're going to use a symbol for the forbidden, like we do in hashtags, and Kuwait is the dangerous hashtag capital of the GCC, you can end up in court. And these are court papers from the battery hashtag. So if you think you can use a symbol for the forbidden and get away with it, you can't. The UAE has led the GCC in coming up with much stricter social media laws so that they can keep up with the technology, so that the forbidden can follow us. Now I'm going to give you a small taste of Kuwaiti censorship. Are we ready to do this? I need you with me. So, as social media continues, people find new ways to push boundaries and interpret these creative mediums. Sorry. Okay. Now you've had the full Kuwaiti cinema experience. We're not going to continue. This is censored. Okay? What this young lady then decides to do is wedge the passport in her posterior, continue the dance, and then open it so that everybody can see the passport number and know her identity. Now, certainly we can all agree that this is forbidden. A passport carries the national icon. It's a national taboo. It's also very strange. Is this a political statement? Is this anger because women can't travel? Or is it just a crazy person using social media to do something wild? We don't know. But as we discover ourselves and our limits within the new forbidden and the new taboo, we're going to continue to express what we love and what we abhor about our cultures. Thank you very much.